Chinese property developer Evergrande is collapsing, but its problems are just the tip of the iceberg. What lies under the water is the now shaky pillar of the Chinese economy, real estate. What ugly truth is the Evergrande drama revealing about China's so-called economic miracle? Does China have the tools in its arsenal to keep the growth going or prevent a crisis? And what does an at-risk economy mean for the ruling Chinese Communist Party? In this special report, we look at what Beijing still has left up its sleeve to convince the Chinese people to ignore widespread issues and human rights abuse to preserve the economy, and examine exactly how far this teetering domino effect could go. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Chinese property developer Evergrande is collapsing, but its problems are just the tip of the iceberg. What lies under the water is the now shaky pillar of the Chinese economy, real estate. What ugly truth is the Evergrande drama revealing about China's so-called economic miracle? Does China have the tools in its arsenal to keep the growth going or prevent a crisis? And what does an at-risk economy mean for the ruling Chinese Communist Party? In this special report, we look at what Beijing still has left up its sleeve to convince the Chinese people to ignore widespread issues and human rights abuse in order to preserve the economy, and examine exactly how far this teetering domino effect could go. But first, how much trouble is Evergrande really in? Let's size it up. In the past few weeks, Evergrande's investors have been surrounding the company's headquarters, demanding their money back. The second largest real estate developer in China is drowning under a more than $300 billion bill. To understand how big that dollar amount is, that's about the same value as South Africa's entire GDP and more than Russia's total government debt. Of that $300 billion, $19 billion are in offshore bonds, meaning money from international bondholders. Many experts believe that offshore debt has even less chance of getting paid back than onshore debt if the Chinese regime was to bail Evergrande out. Those foreign bondholders include some of the world's largest asset managers in North America and Europe, as well as the Japanese government pension fund. Evergrande reportedly owes money to around 170 domestic banks and 120 other financial firms who may or may not get their money back. The property giant has currently sold over 1.5 million houses to Chinese citizens, but those properties haven't been built yet. And as for the Chinese citizens who poured their life savings into home buying with Evergrande, they may never see those houses delivered. On top of that, Evergrande directly employs over 200,000 people and provides work for 4 million others, a massive potential for job loss. So that's what's at risk. Evergrande is sinking and has already failed to make multiple debt payments. Now it's taking these factors and people down with it. Evergrande has started selling off some of its completed properties, but with big discounts. But experts warn that with cheap housing flooding the market, significant real estate price drops are looming. The scary thing is Evergrande isn't alone. There are dozens of other Chinese developers out there who are equally in trouble, already missing payments or facing looming deadlines they probably won't reach. The bankruptcy wave has already started among developers. According to a Chinese media report, as of September, 274 real estate companies have filed for bankruptcy in China. Most of them are smaller companies, but that still puts the sector at a rate of almost one bankruptcy per day. Real estate is a $5 trillion sector in China. The Chinese regime has been relying on it and its related industries to keep the economy going over the past 2 decades. Real estate accounts for nearly 30% of the Chinese economy. That's compared to just 9% of Japan's economy before the country's housing bubble burst in the 90s, and just 6% in the U.S. during the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis, when the collapse of the housing bubble triggered a global financial disaster. As a result, Chinese housing prices have risen to extremely high levels, especially in major cities. According to a Chinese media report, the ratio of house prices to income was 48 in the Chinese city of Shenzhen and 30 in both Beijing and Shanghai as of last year. That's compared to 9.3 for San Francisco and 6.6 for New York. Chinese media reports say that in the Chinese city of Nanjing, an average person has to work for about 20 years in order to afford an apartment, with one caveat. In that time, the person can't pay to eat or drink or spend absolutely any money on anything else. And here's the even larger problem. The bigger and shinier a housing market bubble gets, the uglier the aftermath will be if it bursts. Many believe Beijing won't allow widespread fallout to happen in order to maintain social stability. But on the other hand, the Communist Party leader Xi Jinping seems more determined than ever to crack down on developers' borrowing frenzy. Saving these companies could look like a slap in the face. As we watch fate play out for China's housing market and economy, one question remains: how did it all begin? To watch today's full special report, click the link in the description down below. We are working with Epoch TV, and all Friday special reports are published there in full length. Now we turn to today's daily news. Chinese tech giant Huawei paid $500,000 in 3 months to lobby the White House. That's according to a recent government report. The report states that lobbying was for issues related to telecommunication services and impacted trade issues. Huawei hired one of Washington's most powerful lobbyists, Anthony Thomas Podesta, in July. The disclosure comes less than a month after Huawei's chief financial officer, Meng Wanzhou, was allowed to return to China. Huawei was blacklisted by the Trump administration for national security concerns. The trade ban was expanded last August to prevent Huawei from acquiring U.S. semiconductors. Ajit Pai, former chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, issued a warning last December, saying Huawei is closely tied to the Chinese Communist Party on every level of the company. Pai says numerous security vulnerabilities were found in Huawei's equipment and said that could have been done on purpose. CNBC cited a White House official saying the release of the report has nothing to do with Meng Wanzhou, but still emphasized Huawei is untrustworthy and is a security threat, adding export controls against Huawei remain in place. According to Washington-based research group Open Secrets, Huawei spent nearly $3 million on lobbying in 2019 and over $1 million so far this year. Washington-based think tank the Heritage Foundation published a commentary in August, warning of Huawei's increased lobbying campaign, including the hiring of Podesta. The foundation urges the Biden administration to reject these lobbying efforts and hold the line on Huawei. Now we look to Taiwan. President Biden said Thursday the U.S. is committed to coming to Taiwan's defense if China attacks. He was asked twice during CNN's town hall.
So are you saying that the United States would come to Taiwan's defense if China attacked?
Yes, we have a commitment to do that.
This comment comes after Beijing escalated harassment against the island with a show of military force in Taiwan's air defense zone. Biden's clear answer seems to be in opposition to America's policy of strategic ambiguity. The U.S. is committed to helping the island strengthen its ability to defend itself against Communist China, but has also been following a so-called strategic ambiguity policy for decades. As a result, the U.S. hasn't given a clear answer to the question of if it would intervene militarily when China attacks Taiwan. But following Biden's statement, a White House spokesman denied there would be a significant shift in U.S.'s policy, saying the president was not announcing any change in our policy. And China reacted by warning the U.S. not to send any wrong signals to what it called the separatist forces of Taiwan independence. On the other side, Taiwanese officials thanked Biden for his words. Most countries, including the U.S., do not recognize Taiwan as an independent country. Communist China claims the island as part of its territory and has never given up on wanting to take it over by force. But the U.S. has been providing support to Taiwan, including arms sales. China is again facing pressure over allegations of human rights abuses in Xinjiang. While UN members urge Beijing to grant access to Xinjiang for their investigation, China's envoy to the UN fires back, saying the barrier comes from foreign countries.
China's United Nations envoy angrily responded to accusations of rights abuses in the Xinjiang region, saying China cannot accept the visit being labeled as an investigation with presumed guilt.
The barriers are not on the Chinese side. It's the politicized practice, it's the preset conditions of a number of Western countries which have made this visit not impossible to happen.
Dozens of countries kept up pressure on China at the United Nations Thursday. UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet has been negotiating access to Xinjiang since September 2018, hoping for a visit to examine reports of serious violations against Muslim Uyghurs. At the Human Rights Council in June, more than 40 countries urged China to give Bachelet immediate access. But Beijing denies all allegations of abuses and fired back. Confrontations over Xinjiang between China and most foreign countries have become regular occurrences at the United Nations General Assembly and Human Rights Council.
Chinese authorities are intensifying virus prevention and control measures in parts of China. That's as state reports show more than 40 new virus cases in the country on Thursday. The Epoch Times spoke with a Shanghai local in the midst of a lockdown. She was in a hospital with her mother when the lockdown was suddenly imposed. The newspaper gave her a pseudonym to protect her identity.
It was about 6 or 7 in the evening. It was locked down with no clear information about the reason. We couldn't get out. I told someone at the time that I took my mother to see the doctor. For my mother, she would definitely not be able to survive sitting on a hard bench for a whole night. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, the hospital gave out mattresses and quilts.
Ms. Lin says no one was allowed to leave. As of Thursday, the day of the interview, she was still confined there. Meanwhile, in Beijing, the virus situation is heating up as well. According to state reports, at least one district's virus risk level has been raised from low risk to medium. In northwest China's Gansu province is suspending in-person classes for nearly 2,000 schools. Now we hear from a Chinese dissident. He says he's a changed man after seeing information from the free world. He tells us about the costs that came with choosing freedom. NTD's Juliet Song has more on that.
Yiliu Fei is from China's Hubei province. That's where Wuhan is located and where the CCP virus was first detected. After the virus broke out, authorities put Hubei on lockdown, cutting off its access to the outside world. At that time, Yi went to the border between Hubei and another province.
I found the border was locked off, and there was no way you could cross it. I filmed some videos and shared them in a social media group chat.
The day after he posted those videos, Yi got a phone call from police officers.
They said I was spreading bad speech online and that I should be held responsible and that I face prison sentences.
Yi said he was scared.
The police officers called me multiple times to threaten me, and local authorities also threatened me. They said I was attacking the Chinese Communist Party, the government, and China on Twitter, and they asked me to delete my Twitter account.
In China, Western social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook are blocked. Authorities use an internet firewall to control what China's 1.4 billion people can see online. But many citizens use software to break through the censorship, and Yi is one of them. In 2011, Yi found a way to cross the internet firewall and access information that's censored in China.
I was really shocked by what I read. For example, the truth about the Tiananmen Square massacre, the famine in Mao Zedong's era, and the Chinese Communist Party's suppression. Turns out that Chinese people suffered so much. Before this, I was brainwashed by the party's propaganda, thinking that the party is great and that former party head Mao Zedong is great.
In 1989, the massacre at China's Tiananmen Square shook the world. The regime sent troops firing gunshots at students who were asking for democracy. But inside China, many citizens don't even know about the event. And for those who do know, many believe what the regime told them, that the students were a mob of extremists. As for Yi, it's not easy for him to communicate what he's seen with his friends.
Many of them think there's something wrong with me when I criticize the Chinese Communist Party, and I argue with them. I lost many friends because of our different viewpoints.
This caught him by surprise.
I didn't expect that we would live in parallel worlds. One group is people like me who have waken up to what is truly happening, but the other group doesn't know, and it's like we're in two different worlds. It's a painful experience for me because I have learned about the regime's cover-up, but I can't help change the situation.
Meanwhile, the police kept calling him.
I was really scared, so I gave up my business in China, left my family, and came to the U.S.
Yi arrived in New York about 4 months ago, but he left behind a broken family. Local authorities learned that he joined some pro-democracy activities after coming to America, and they went to his hometown to pressure his parents. Yi says his parents were quite scared and want to cut ties with him.
I was really sad at first, but on second thought, I could understand them. There's a big gap between our two generations. Some support the Chinese Communist Party, some are against it.
Yi says it's hard for people to make choices when they don't have access to free information. But he also believes that more Chinese citizens will find a way to break through the censorship and taste freedom. Juliet Song, NTD News.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching. But before you go, here's a glimpse into next Friday's special report. It seems a given that media outlets work to report the facts, but some of them in China may not be following that rule. State-run news outlets in the country may not always be showing the big picture, while accusations blame them for getting creative in their reports. Incidents range from what look like pre-planned random interviews to arranging sets and using props. In this special report, we look at cases where Beijing's picture-perfect news coverage may have slipped up, revealing a behind-the-scenes look at what some call fabricated news coverage.